Hey, great to see everybody today. Kind of a different topic. You might notice I'm not wearing my customary red jacket. That's because I'm talking about work-life balance, and apparently I'm trying to balance out things today. Well, actually, I am going on a brief vacation, and that's kind of it just makes the whole topic pretty interesting to me because I see a lot of people talk about work-life balance, talk about how we should I don't know what you want to call it. We should conserve our energy or balance things out so we're not always working or whatever. I don't actually know what that means, right? Like there's a little bit of Yoda in me that's like work life balance is that kind of like do or do not, there is no try, right? Work or don't work, there is no life. I don't know how you play that out, but I just thought today, since I'm actually taking a vacation, I'd talk a little bit about what that looks like because for me vacation can kind of be work too. So it just depends on how you look at it. So I thought I'd start out with kind of looking at this from some different lenses because I think it's really important. I have the unique context of being a father, husband, father, worker, however you want to look at all that, business owner, employee. I got a lot of different hats. But when I think about work life balance, I want to start with my kids because I feel like as a father of grown children now that still like me, I might have actually gotten that part right. So when it comes to work life balance, so I want to talk about that first, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about marriage because I'm just celebrating my 30th anniversary, so I might have gotten that right too. Like we're still together and we still like each other. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, just in like, how do you think about these things, or how do I think about these things? And so I think the first bit with work-life balance and kids is you really got to ask yourself the question of, am I doing my job to provide for my family? That is, shelter, food, transportation, the basics, insurance, healthcare, all those things. Like, is that what I'm doing? Because if you're doing it for those kind of basic reasons, then I feel like you might have more ability to balance your life. That is, if the only intention is to basically go get a paycheck and that paycheck is enough to cover the basics, I think you can do lots of stuff with your kids, with your family. You can have a lot of balance. That being said, if you really want to provide something better, I don't see how you don't over index towards the work side of things, at least for a period of your life. So I personally grew up poor. I grew up in a house with an outhouse for a while. Like we didn't have running water in the bathroom. There was a period of my life where I chopped firewood to keep the house warm. And so I saw my father who had zero work life balance because he was just trying to like keep food on the table. And so there may be people in my audience that are like that. And to you, I just say keep doing what you got to do for your family. My dad did everything he needed to do, and I think that was my example. Was he worked a farm and he worked at a factory at night, and so seeing him live that way was rough, but it's what we need to do to keep food on the table. So for him, work life balance wasn't even a question. It was I work so we can eat. I had the fortune, I had a good fortune of working at a stable job at a university. I was the kind of thing I pretty much could get up in the morning, hit work at 8 o'clock, be home at 5. Could have done that forever, but I knew that for myself personally, I wanted a better life for my kids than where we were at because we weren't exactly paycheck to paycheck, but we were pretty close to that. And I did want them to be able to have a higher education. I did want them to do things. So how are we going to get there from here? Now, I had the fortune also of a wife that didn't work, and so we were able to play that off. She took care of the kids. I went and worked really hard, working 60 hours a week or more as a consultant, traveling away from home, all of that. But when I think about my kids, there were a couple of things I did, especially in those most serious times. So there was a time where I had the 8 to 5 job, but I went to graduate school also, right? And so it was the kind of thing where, as far as graduate school was concerned, I worked that work around like the projects and whatnot to where I was doing stuff either early in the morning or late at night, and I made sure that my kids got a bedtime every night. Like if we didn't sit down to dinner together because of whatever, we at least had a good half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour of just bedtime routine, right? That was everything from, when they were really little, bath time, to reading stories, to later reading stories or watching TV or video games. But there was a good solid, if we didn't get dinner together also, we got a good solid 45 minutes, an hour every day of just spending time together. And I would argue that that was, key to their early growing up, was that we all were together, we spent time together, and we did things that interacted with each other. I think one of the things I'm concerned about parents that are dealing with their kids today is how much sort of iPad phone time do you all have where you're not even connected to the same reality, right? If you're all sitting around on the couch and you're on your device, are you experiencing anything together, even if the TV's on, right? Like, there's something to be said for, we don't have screens, we don't have anything going on, and there's a good hour, 2 hours a day that we're spending just us together doing a thing. Now, that thing might be reading a storybook, right? Like, might be reading out loud, might be listening to something out loud, might be snuggled down watching a big epic movie or something. But from a balance perspective, figuring out how to work in daily time with your kids, I don't feel like that's not a nice to have. That is, once you've decided you're going to be parents, like, that's a requirement somehow, right? Like, I feel like you really have to do that, otherwise your kids are just not connected. They don't know who you are, you don't know who they are. You got to spend the time. Now, there was a period of time where that wasn't even possible. I was traveling for work, so I was gone 4 days a week. But even then, I made sure to call every night. Now, I got a whole story that we could talk about how that turned into me writing books. But the gist of that was, every day I did at least prioritize a good long phone call with my kids. And later video is way more ubiquitous now. Back then, it was, a cell phone was probably the best thing I could work out in a lot of cases, just because of the internet. But the net of it is, even in all my traveling, I made sure I connected with my kids every day. And so that's what I'd say from work life balance. If you're not connecting with them regularly, that's a problem, and you got to figure that out, right? The other thing from a balance perspective that I think is super important is that there are seasons in your children's upbringing. There are seasons where you have a greater or lesser impact on what's going on with them, and where you have more or less flexibility in what's happening. And what I mean by that is, I had, when my kids were really little, so from 0 to 5, kind of in that ballpark, I really feel like being physically present has to be what you strive for. That has to be the gold standard. And it's just because so much bonding, so much of their development is going on at that point in time. Plus, they're just harder to deal with, right? Like, when the child can't get their own food, for one of the parents, that's a harder time. Like, whoever's around, if somebody else is at work, or if you're trying to both be at work, there's just real problems with that. So, whatever you can do to make sure you've got physical time regularly with your kids between 0 and 5, I think is, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of mandatory. Like, if I was, that's advice I would give my kids. So, advice to any parents, you got to figure out from a work perspective, can my career take the hit for a while I have kids in that age range, to not travel a lot, or to not take the job that causes me to work 15 hours a day, right? Like, whatever you can do to build in the time when they're that little. Then I'd say between 5 and 11, somewhere in that ballpark, it's a little different. They're more independent, so they don't have as much actual physical needs. There's not as much you have to do for them. By 7 or 8, you can start to teach them to do stuff for themselves. They can make a bed, they can do laundry, they can do things. So now that it's not as much about the physical needs, it's about the more emotional needs. Those remote calls kind of work. I feel like, at least for my kids, we stayed connected through that time frame of, like I said, from about 6 to 10, 6 to 12. That worked pretty well. We can make that work. And so you might look at your career and say, okay, my kids are kind of all in that space. Maybe I can take a harder assignment right now. Maybe I can do something that's going to cause longer hours. Maybe I can do something that's going to travel. But then what I found was, once they got to being teenagers, so now I've got, every child is over the age of 13, or over the age of 12, like in that range. Then what I found was, I needed to be present again. And so it's the kind of thing where I literally made after getting a text from my 14-year-old late at night, and a conversation with my 12-year-old when I got home, it was kind of like, no, I got to do something different. And so, I made a very conscious choice to like get off the road, to be more present, to be physically there. And I feel like that really paid dividends. My kids like me. They want to like we want to do family vacations together. We want to spend time together. So when I think about work-life balance and kids, I think you've got to think about it as seasons. Because now my kids are grown. They're off. Well, technically, they work for me at least part of the time. And so that's largely I would accredit that to being present when they're young, so that they really bond with you and you know them and they know you, building your career in that middle period where there's a little more flexibility, but then being back for the tough stuff of the teenage years, right? Like the emotional stuff of their own emotional development and things that go on as a teenager for them, but also just the chaos that comes from friends, right? Like being able to physically stand there and look at these horrible texts that are coming in real time with my kids, that mattered, right? Like being there and seeing this text come in and having my arm around them, that mattered. And so I'd say from work life balance and kids, like it's really important with teenagers to be around as much as you can so that you can do that. But also, we just had a lot of fun when they were teenagers. Like there was robotics club, there was theater club. We did a lot of stuff together that was just great and lasting memories. And so that's kind of what I think about work life balance. And now that they're grown and out of the house, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that work life balance and kids at that point. Maybe there is no need to consider it. Although I do work with them on planning vacations. Like we try to do a family vacation together at least once a year. And so that is a consideration for work, is how do we work that out, so we can all vacation together. All right, so that's the first part. The next part, as far as I'm concerned, on work-life balance and marriage, it's kind of a how do I put it? On the one hand, it's very personalized, right? Like this is something you and your spouse have to work out. You just have to figure it out between the two of you. But it was the kind of thing with my wife. She's like, look, you are miserable doing what you're doing. You have to do something else. And this was back when I was working the 8 to 5 day job that just what didn't seem to be going anywhere. You got to do something else. Let's figure it out. And when it came up that I had this job potential to go to big tech, she was like, well, that sounds really scary, right? Like someone described going into consulting for big tech as imagine there's a portal on the other side where there's unimaginable riches. Um, and so of course you want to walk through, but if you do, you might never see your family again, right? Like that was like a very real thing that people said. And so when I think about that one, but she was right. I needed to be going into an environment where I was going to be very intellectually challenged, but also had the headroom to be able to provide for my family at the level I wanted to. Like I wanted to be the kind of parent that could pay for college for their kids. I wanted to be the kind of parent that, we provided things that, we had nice things, that kind of stuff. I wanted to be that person. And so my wife and I really worked through that of, are we going to accept a job where I'm traveling all the time? Now, at first that was pretty problematic. We had to go through a lot of tough stuff. I think the worst thing that happened in the very first month of that, me being gone, was like I had 3 week period where I had to go to mandatory in-person training for the company, where I was just physically gone for 3 weeks. And in the middle of that, the furnace caught on fire in the middle of winter. So like we had a lot of stuff we had to navigate and figure out between the two of us. But we did figure it out through our marriage, and that was good. Like we navigated that together. And so the way my wife and I navigated this kind of high end travel job, but that I think even if it wasn't a big travel job, if it was just something where you had a job that was keeping you working, 14 hours a day, whatever, is we have always managed, like from a keeping our marriage real perspective, we've always managed um like a daily connection time, right? So it's the kind of thing, worst case scenario, it's 10-15 minutes before bed, we're on the phone talking to each other just to see what's going on, to make sure I know what's going on in her work or her day or what's going on with the kids. Or we take a walk. Like I would say that at least when I've been physically home, us taking a walk together daily for 15 minutes has been a big thing. And you got to understand, like a lot of times I'm working, a 14-hour day, 16-hour day. Like that happens to me regularly just because of all the chaos that's in my life, work wise. And so, but it's still like, oh, it's time to take a walk, and we go take a walk. So I think the first thing is that daily connection, that daily diversion of some sort needs to be there if you're going to balance out, a marriage for 30 years like I have. The second thing though that we've done that we've been very serious about is a weekly date night. Like we have had, I can't say we've had a completely uninterrupted stream of date nights, right? But I would say probably 45, somewhere between 45 and 50 weeks of the year since my kids were little, like since we had children, we have had a Friday night date night of some sort. Now that date night sometimes has been like a very long phone call with me in a hotel somewhere because I'm doing an implementation on Saturday, and that kind of thing has happened. But for the most part, we try to get out and go have dinner. Like when the kids were little and we didn't have money, it was the kids go to the basement and have a pizza party, and we have dinner upstairs, as and have a conversation without them. But I would say, work life balance, it's that making sure that there is a block of time every week that you and your spouse can kind of talk through things. And then finally, we've always prioritized at least one, if not two, weekend getaways without the kids. Like there's always been a time that you know somewhere in the year we've said no, we're not doing work and that sort of thing. And I think the big thing with that has been, especially with all this social media influencer stuff I try to do, and my side hustle, there's been a lot of like, okay, no, I really have to uninstall Facebook and all that stuff, because if I have it on there, that's going to take away from the weekend away, right? So I think, especially with all the digital things, but making sure to turn off notifications from work and really being present during those times is super important. And so that's kind of, I've talked about kids, I've talked about my marriage and kind of how to I manage that. So the last real question is work life balance a thing? And I just don't think it is. Like I don't think you get to have an actual scale of this amount of my life is work, and it equally balances out with home life and things like that, because it's just unequal throughout your life is not an equal mix of work and life, right? It's not an equal mix of sleep 8 hours, do my personal thing 8 hours, and do work things 8 hours. It's not. And it's not for a lot of different reasons. One of them is just your family time itself, is what it is. Like it's family time, right? Like there's that sort of bit of it. But the other thing is just stuff happens, right? There are seasons where your parents get ill and you've got to leave work. Well, there's no balance on the work side when you just had to take off for 6 weeks to deal with a parent that's in the hospital or is dying. Those kind of things do happen, and so there's no balance on the work side. You got to go do your thing. On the flip side, like there are only so many years you're going to have to really do excellence, right? There's a lot of reasons for that. One of the things is just the skill set you build up over time becomes irrelevant. Like it happens, right? 25% of jobs that exist today didn't exist 5 years ago. So the thing that you're perfect and excellent in, that you spent 20 years of your career building up, all of a sudden isn't worth anything, and you need to build another skill. So, there's that kind of continual retooling, and during a retooling period, you got to spend some time more than work, the day work, to be able to stay ahead. I also think just excellence takes time. So if you want to do something excellent, if you want to do something that is better than the top 90%, you want to be very excellent at something, it takes just a lot of dedication. So for me personally, I really haven't thought about balance as the thing, right? Like I never, I've never really sought work life balance. What I've really sought is making sure that I'm a good, uh, husband and father, that I've got connection to my faith community, and that once those things are taken care of, the rest of it is as much work as I feel fulfilled by. And I think that's really the trick to it is, are you fulfilled in that work, right? I've worked in corporate America. I still work in corporate America in my day job. And there are parts of that job that are very fulfilling. Like I get to coach people, I get to do neat things, I get to play with some interesting technology. There are parts of that that are very fulfilling, but there's also a seasonality about that. I talked about timing yesterday in my talk, and when there's a very slow season in that work where there's a lot of moving parts that are moving around and you're waiting to kind of get in and really do your thing, but you can't. There's a lot of time in my mind that's just not occupied, right? Like my brain is open to new things, big things. So having this side job, this side business, is a great outlet for my creative things and a great outlet for my desire to be excellent and to do things that just, the time of year is such that at my day job it's not a thing. But it's also just something I really like. If I'm doing something I enjoy, is it actually work? Right? And so I'll give you an example. I had a really funny conversation. I was talking to somebody about trade shows. I love doing a trade show. If you've seen me at a trade show, it's a whole thing. Like I turn on my inner Billy Mays, and I really enjoyed a trade show. And so I was telling somebody, my ideal job is that every Monday I get a new product. Right? Here's a new thing to pitch. I get the whole bill of materials of all the ways that it's awesome, and objections and all that, and I learned the pitch. I got like Monday to Wednesday morning to learn the pitch, and then Wednesday afternoon I have to go to the trade show and set up, right, and practice in the environment. I get to practice in the environment my sales pitch before it starts, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all I do all day is pitch the product. And then Sunday I take a rest and go to church and stuff like that. And then Monday I do it again. I would love that job. That job would be the best. I love standing in front of people doing a pitch. I just love it. It's super fun. I wouldn't think that's work to me actually, because it would just be fun. Like getting a new product every week, a new thing to learn, a new thing to practice. Like just practicing the nuance of how you talk about a product to people is something I find really fun. So I said that to somebody, and they're like, "That's your ideal job? When do you get rest? When do you, and I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, it's totally restful to stand, and it's crazy because it is. It's kind of totally restful to stand there all day and pitch because I just enjoy it so much. And so I think that's the other misnomer in the work life balance. There are many people who are just so fulfilled by the work they're doing. They enjoy what they're doing. They enjoy the people they're working at with. They just love it. Why would they not just do that? Like, why build a hobby? Why have this other thing you're doing? Why sit at home and scroll? I mean, I think that's the big thing is these days, like a lot of what's not work for me might as well just be, it could be considered scrolling since I don't have kids around anymore. That's not terribly interesting. And yeah, I mean, I could go have dinner with friends and that sort of stuff, but I work with a lot of my friends are people in the publishing industry, in the audio industry that I get to meet at night and hang out with them and talk to them about what they're doing and then collaborate on building their business with my business. I love that. It's super fun. They're super fun. We all are enjoying it. So to me, I just don't think that work life balance really is a thing, right? That if that's I mean, there are people that are there, but if you really want to be excellent at something, and if you really enjoy something, why would you arbitrarily set limits that don't need to be there when you have dealt with the important things? Like I said at the beginning, I started with kids, then my wife, and then kind of myself, because really that's probably where I see the balance is that at the end, you know, family and my faith community, that's the big rock, and as long as that big rock is taken care of, then I can fall over to the other side and do as much work as needed to feel fulfilled and to enjoy myself. So I hope today's talk helped. Like I said, I'm getting ready to do vacation. I'm gonna skip the next few days of lives, and even though I said I'm gonna do a live every day, that's part of the, I guess the balance is I don't have to do it if I'm actually on vacation. So I'm taking a few days off, gonna enjoy myself. I will probably write a book. Like I've got a book I'm trying to finish, so maybe Monday I might spend some time finishing up that book. I did get some new copy from my collaborator. So my stepdad and I are working on a book. Um, Logan versus the Pouty Pawpaws. So that's gonna be fun. But again, that's fun. Like I'm gonna enjoy working on writing these books, and so even though it looks like I'm heads down working, I'm having a great time. So anyway, I hope this helps, and especially if you're somebody that is worried about their work life balance, wants somebody to double check, ping me, let me know. I'm happy to have a conversation. Anyway, I'll see y'all next time.